All right, everyone, we're back. This is the second part of a series on the DRS Mystery. You can see the first video uploaded to my YouTube channel a few days ago, to give you the intro. But to make a long story short, we're diving into what's going on with GameStop and why is DRS numbers not increasing. So I highly recommend you go watch that first video. This is the second part, and we'll just dive right in. So let's continue.
Okay. So just to reiterate, when GameStop started reporting the number of directly registered shares back in 2021, quarter three, that language directly registered, those are DRS, right? And they did that quarter three, the next quarter, which was an annual report, and the next 3 quarters. And then in 2022, quarter three, there was some unusual volume right around the DRS record date. Now, when I say DRS record date, what I mean is, in their first time they report it, and all subsequent reports, they say as of October 30th, 2021, there were this many shares directly registered. That is the DRS record date. So they did that the following 5 quarters, but we noted, specifically 6 days noted in his HeatLamp theory, there was some unusual volume on that DRS record date. And here's a chart here that shows, here's the Q2 earnings, Q3 earnings. This is the DRS record date for 2022 Q3. We're running along with 4 and a half million average volume. And then on the DRS record date, there's this huge spike, which we hadn't seen before. So this is where it gets,
What we're trying to figure out is, if you're only going to count the numbers every 3 months and it's going to be on one specific day, and all of a sudden that one specific day happens to be the highest volume day or around the highest volume day, it looks like over the last 3 or 4 months, why is that? Is GameStop, are they triggering the volume? Or is the volume gonna happen and they are picking that date? It used to be, we'll get into this in a little bit, it used to be their record date was on Saturdays, and on Saturdays, computer shares not open, and we have found some language, that states that certain things can or can't happen, on weekends. I believe computer share was down, around one of the times, mysteriously down. And so, GameStop ended up changing the record date to, it's been Wednesdays or Thursdays lately. But, the fact that this page that we're looking at and the highest day happened to be right around, the time of a record day, is it coincidence? It was kind of too early to tell, but I do know, in certain places that we were talking about it, it was, to me, this says we need more eyeballs on this. Like, what the heck? We need as many people looking at this. And instead of embracing that, certain people were trying to squash discussion. They're saying, hey, well, the record date was on a Saturday. The volume didn't happen on a Saturday. So therefore, there's nothing to this. Stop looking at it. And every time someone was trying to tell us to stop doing this, kind of led me to believe that we were on the right track, that we needed to, get more eyes on this. If you wanted to mess with, if somebody wanted to mess with shares, they would want to do it around or on, the record date.
That great clarification. Again, that's important to note. All of the reportings of DRS were last Saturday of the fiscal quarter, which makes complete sense because the 10Q, the quarterly reports, their financials went to the last Saturday of the fiscal quarter, right? So it made sense. This was new. If you do enough research for filings, you'll see that there have been some reports of number of shares registered by record holders in 10Ks, but never has a company stated how many directly registered shares there are every quarter or in a quarterly report. I haven't found an example of that. So this is all new, right?
Mm-hmm.
So GameStop starts reporting directly registered shares, and they choose the last Saturday of the fiscal quarter. That makes complete sense because it matches up with their financial period. And here we are on this, and this will be the last time they reported on the last Saturday of the fiscal quarter, which is really bizarre with the other stuff that's you'll see that changed.
Mm-hmm.
You see these high spikes on the Friday, Monday, wrapping around that Saturday. So this is that previous slide. This is that last Saturday of the fiscal quarter, that spike. You can see in red the other DRS record dates. They don't really stand out in terms of volume, right? This is volume here. And I've got a 60-day moving average volume in gray. So here is that spike associated with the 2022 Q3 DRS record date. Now, if they followed that precedent of previous 5 quarters, the next Saturday, last Saturday of the fiscal quarter, would have fallen here, and DRS record date would have been January 28th, 2023. But instead, they chose 6 days before that quarterly report. Now, when I say quarterly report, there's Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, right? But the 10K is the Q4, but it kind of summarized everything in the annual as well as reports for the quarter. So instead of the 10K showing the record date, which should have been January 28th, they used the record date of March 22nd. And that is a huge spike in volume. And there's a lot of things to put in there. First of all, on March 22nd, or the night before, earnings were released. It didn't come with the 10K. The 10K wasn't issued until like a week and a half later, which was bizarre in itself. I think it was the first time in like 5 years the earnings and 10K didn't come together, or earnings and the 10Q didn't come together. But for them to pick the DRS record date of 6 days prior on a huge volume spike, which was 67 million shares traded in one day, there was a lot of questions there. Like, okay, you have this big spike the previous quarter, first time, and by the way, there's not a whole lot of available shares at this time, right? We've been tracking ETFs, mutual funds, pension funds, insider ownership. We're starting to think, are they doing something with these DRS shares, right? And why can GameStop pick any day out there for their DRS record date? At this point, it's seeming to suggest that maybe they can. And if they can, why are they picking this huge volume spiked day? But another clue or, odd thing that happened here when they chose March 22nd was they took out the directly registered language. For the first time ever, they did not say these shares were directly registered. Instead, they said they were held by record holders. Now, this is a 10K, and 10Ks typically have record holder numbers. But if you looked at the last 10K for GameStop, they talked about record holders, and they also talked about directly registered shares. This time, they left out directly registered. They just said, number of record holders. They listed the number of shares, but we're thinking, okay, maybe these aren't all directly registered. And, they were not. We found in Grapevine, a large majority were not directly registered. Not a large majority. A large portion were not directly registered. So this kind of
So could it be that they are moving the record date to try to highlight, fraud that's happening in the system? Because if there's 68 million shares traded on earnings day, And maybe that volume, as we saw, is like multiples above even the prior peaks. That points to me somebody trying to roll forward like massive equity swaps or something, or trying to get out of some large positions on earnings day and suppress the price. Because just like with every other earnings except for the most recent one, the price fell by quite a bit, if I recall. And so could that be like management subtly trying to signal to us that there's shenanigans going on and this is something we have to pay attention to, but just by moving the DRS record date?
I absolutely think that's why.
Hmm.
I absolutely think that's why. And I think it's now this is a little tinfoil here, but I think it goes back to the Brazilian puts. Those represented, post split over 200 million shares. If those were associated with the circumvention of Reg Show closeout obligations, then those Brazilian puts represented over 200 million shares. And if those were to avoid failure to delivers, those would need to be reset periodically. And when I look at this graph, and we'll get to this other spike here in a minute, but it seems like if they are part of some equity swap or circumvention of Reg Show closeout obligations, that they periodically have to dip into what I think are the direct stock plan shares to reset those synthetic options positions. And that might be a whole nother talk because there's a lot to be said about that. 6 days, I talk to 6 days a lot. So would you like to chime in at
Yeah, I
all with
mean,
your
yeah,
thoughts?
we do talk a lot. It's probably almost every day. We're always, sharing information, very, very curious and persistent minds, and so it's, we're always trying to look at everything from a different angle, is the record date cause the volume, or does the volume cause the record date? There's a lot of things that we don't know. But what we do know is that high volume has happened 3 out of the last 5 record dates. And so there are some certain people that will say, well, because it's not happening every time, it means nothing, but 3 out of 5 is 60%. And, as you guys were saying, I like to call it, when you say periodically, I believe there is financial lingo that they call it from time to time, in air quotes, from time to time. They basically someone has to reconcile something. They can't let it go on forever, but they don't necessarily have to do it at a specific time. So we'll get a little bit more about the language change. But the language change to me, where it says held by does not mean owned by, and so it also, they don't have the directly registered. What is directly registered mean? I spent a long time trying to figure out what does directly registered mean. I found 2 issuers. I email a lot of investor relations departments, and I actually found 2 who who emailed me back, and I said, do these include investment plan shares and DRS? And for them, they said both of them said yes. And so GameStop, I don't know if you've ever tried to email investor relations or call them, but they just don't respond. And so that kind of got me into reaching out to other issuers because they were actually responding. Some of the things that I was trying to get in my research for GameStop, I couldn't get from GameStop. And so I was asking other people because in the beginning it was, does directly registered mean not planned shares? Because are they direct? And I know ComputerShare has said you're directly on the register, which is just another saying you're on the register. I think sometimes there's language that's thrown in there that's unnecessary. If you say you're directly registered, on the ledger, does that mean DRS? Because directly registered is the first 2 letters of DRS. But getting back to these, high volume dates, I think, there's something here, and I don't know what it is, but I do know that ComputerShare has changed their language. They have moved their record date to a day that the market is open, on a day that ComputerShare is open and in the office. And these volume, if you look, it looks like if you go all the way back to, uh, uh, April 1st of 2022, two of the highest volume days by far were on record dates, the very day, that GameStop is counting the shares. So, there's a lot here, and it needs more eyes, not less, and that's why we're here, and that's why we're talking about this.
Well, when you said April 2022, you mean 2023, right?
No,
Yeah.
I was, yeah, no, I was talking about if you go all the way back to 2022, which had that high, it looks like there's a hundred million volume day. The April 2023 was the highest volume,
Since then.
in the last almost 2 years. The highest volume in the last 2 years, two of the days have been record dates.
Yeah.
I was just kind of trying to compare how big, 60 million shares is. If you look at, there's no other day that's even, near the 30 or 40 million, and now we've got two different days that are above 60 million, right at the time of the record date.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's, can GameStop choose any day for their DRS record date? If so, why did they choose March 22nd, that huge spike in volume? And why did they drop the directly registered language? Big questions. And why did they choose, why did they go from last Saturday of the fiscal quarter to what seems like an arbitrary day, 6 to 7 days prior to the releasing of the filing of the quarterly report or the 10K. So here's just a look at the last two DRS record dates, well, the last four actually, but March 22nd, 67 million volume, and then November 29th and 30th, huge spike. I think it was 60 million and then 16 million, something around there. But the two in between, not noticeable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Q1, Q2, not much of a volume spike.
It seems like every 9 months that is the reset period.
I mean, for this year at least,
Or 6 months
right?
actually, right? I'm not doing my math right. 6 months,
I think 3 months,
roughly.
6 months,
Three.
9 months, right? 3 months here, 3 months here, 3 months here. So 9 months.
Oh, I guess roughly, yeah. I mean, it's not exact, but yeah, that is. Hmm.
Yeah, I memean, we've got out of the last five, we had three high volume dates. As we get more data points, we might be able to predict this a little better. It seems like anytime we're kind of onto something, though, there's a little shakeup of, when things. I feel like, as soon as something is seen, the ability to hide it, they approach it from a different direction. And so so we'll see. But maybe there is something to this 9 months thing, but we just don't have enough data points. But what we do know is that it keeps happening right when GameStop is counting the shares.
So this, just a summary before we get into, I think
I mean, what 6 days could talk about, right? Heat lamp theory.
exactly.
The exact difference between book and plan.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
that's where I think the meat is, something that folks can do that can really change the playing field, in my opinion. But just to reiterate, the first five quarterly reports specified directly registered, and they report it for the last Saturday of the fiscal quarter. The heat lamp theory was published around December 14th. 6days had two major posts that really highlighted some significant things. And, right after that or soon after, GameStop started changing things. They dropped the directly registered language. they started using the DRS record date 6 to 7 days prior to the SEC filing, which is really weird. You know, there's a lot of tinfoil out there, but think about this. HeatLamp, which is published by 6 Days 1 Week, they changed their DRS record date to 6 days to 1 week prior to the earnings date. That's pretty weird, right?
Yeah, yeah. We thought
That's
that was funny. I tried to make light of it, but so for clarity, all of them have been 6 days, which a lot of people call me. And then there was one of the record dates was there was a holiday, a Monday holiday, and so on that one,
it was 7 days.
7 days. It was 7 days. So all the record dates have been 6 days or 1 week.
1 week.
But
that could be another signal. That could be another signal that they're trying to message you.
So I know a lot of people are asking, well, when's the next one? And so what someone had mentioned to me, which made sense, is that they believe there's something to the number, 91. It's basically, 3 months, but is 3 months 90 days or 91 days? It seems like when people are asking, well, when's this going to happen again? When is the next record date going to be? And I believe it'll be on February 29th, which will be 6 days before whatever that is, March 6th. So I believe the next 10Q will come out on March 6th, and it'll show a record date of February 29th. And so I guess we'll see if that's the case. But I don't know if you wanted me to kind of dive into the heat lamp theory a little bit and just how all this kind of came about. That's kind of its own show, but happy to answer questions about it.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's start at the beginning. What is heat lamp theory?
Yeah, so the heat lamp theory and what Lawson was talking about, there were 2 posts, and I'll try to keep this quick. The very first part, there is a investor that had reached out to me. She said, no one's been listening to me. I feel like they're able to mess with my book shares because I own plan shares, and it was like, well, this doesn't make sense, but tell me about it. And she said that she was talking to Computershare and was talking about dividends, and she was trying to figure out dividends, how they would be handled if you had book shares and plan shares. And because it's GameStop and they don't have dividends, they didn't want to answer hypothetical questions. So I happen to own a share Nordstrom, the stock, and they happen to be doing a cash dividend really quick. And so what I did is I went and bought a handful of plan shares just in time. I started to reach out to Computershare and say, hey, I want to get, cash on my DRS share, or my book share, and I want to get reinvestment on my plan shares. And they say, no, you can't do that. And I'm like, well, why not? And they say, it turns out to be is all accounts at Computershare are either enrolled in direct stock plan or they're not. And so you can't have a hybrid of, you can't get cash on your book share and dividend reinvestment on the plan. And so it was like, well, how is that the case? And so what ended up happening, I was expecting this. It was all or nothing. They had told me that. But what it turned out is we're like, well, what does it mean to be in the plan? What does it mean to be enrolled in the direct stock plan? And so, and how do you get in and how do you get out? And so we came up with a little Punnett square, that says, here's the things that will enroll you in the plan. And if you're enrolled in the plan, you're one thing. And if you're not, you're all DRS. And so enrollment in the plan, Computershare calls those DSPP shares. So your account, if you're enrolled in the plan, is all DSPP. And so, if you go back and read the Computershare FAQ, it turns out that when they were talking about DSPP shares, they weren't just talking about shares in your account labeled plan. They were talking about full accounts that are enrolled. And so that got a lot of pushback. I had posted a post about it, and it was the mods told me it was accidentally deleted. It immediately got to 200 likes and everybody's talking about it, and then it was accidentally deleted. And so I was talking to the mods, I reposted it. And as soon as I reposted it, they pushed my old post live, which now kind of diluted it. And then neither one of them really got, traction. But when people talk about the heat lamp, that was really the very first part, is the revelation that DSPP shares are not just plan shares. They're every share enrolled in the plan. And we'll probably get into this a little later, that, it is the DSPP shares. So if you have an account and you're enrolled in direct stock plan, all your shares are DSPP, and they call that all those shares underpin the plan. And so the shares that underpin the plan, a portion, undisclosed portion, which they came out and said is typically, 10 or 20%, are held at DTC. So you're saying, hey, if I have a DRS share and now I just enrolled because I bought plan shares, now they can hold a portion of that in DTC. And so that got a lot of pushback, and so, but what it turned out is that people are like, well, we need to terminate, direct stock. That's the only way to get the hell out of this, plan. If you want only DRS shares not enrolled in the plan, you have to terminate the plan, and so a lot of us were in the plan. I was in the plan because I had bought those, shares. And so once people started realizing, it wasn't a book plan thing, it was a enrolled, not enrolled thing. And so, it's full accounts are enrolled or full accounts are not enrolled. And so that was a big.
So essentially, if you have an account with 100 shares that are booked, that are pure DRS, and then you start buying plan shares, meaning like you enable dividend, the drip, dividend reinvestment, right? Or if you do auto buys, either of those two things will trigger a change into plan shares, and it won't just change. You have 100 DRS shares, and now you have 2 plan shares. It'll make the entire portfolio plan shares, right?
Yeah, well, more specifically, what they call DSPP. So that's one of the things about their labeling is, you can't tell if you're in or out of the plan when you log into your account. It'll say book or plan regardless. To figure out if you're in the plan, you got to go to another page where it says if you're enrolled or not enrolled. And so, really, I would like it if, Computer Share, if you're listening, on the homepage, instead of saying book and plan, if it says DRS or DSPP, why they won't do that. I have my theories. But that was the gist of it. And so there is a current push, a massive push to get people to buy directly on Computer Share because it enrolls all your whole account into the direct stock plan. And so if you buy on Computer Share, it'll enroll your account in the plan and then you can terminate. But the whole process of as soon as you hit buy, your money goes out. Let's say it's today. I hit buy GameStop. I've got all DRS. I hit buy immediately. Right when I hit buy, I'm enrolled. Then I got to wait, 5 days for the purchase to happen. That 5 days I'm enrolled, and then I have to wait for the shares to hit my account, which might be another 3 days. So you're 8 or 9 days. You can't just buy a Computer Share and then terminate the plan. And even when you do it, it sells your fractional. But you're enrolled in the plan for 8 or 9 days, so some people are doing that, that's fine. If people want to buy however they want to buy, I'm fine with that. What I don't like is when there are certain people that are trying to avoid this information getting out. You can't terminate direct stock plan at any time. Like they say, you can't do it when you have a transaction going through. And so, really, the people that are trying to get everyone enrolled in the plan, what they really want you to do is to recurring purchases, because you're forever and ever and ever in DSPP. And so because it's, the 1st and the 15th is when they take your money out. So like I was saying before, if you're enrolled for 8 or 9 days before you could even terminate, well, you can't terminate and then re-enroll. You'll miss the 15th. So it's just a perpetual, forever and ever, your whole account in DSPP, and that's what's being pushed right now.
Yeah.
And,
and notice their language too. They don't say, we only hold up to 20%. It just says typically we would hold 10 to 20%. So again,
where's the cap?
This is all promises. This is all
Right.
theory. They could
And
be putting, if you get enrolled in DSPP, they could be putting everything back in DTCC.
yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, hypothetically, I don't see a cap, but one thing, that I just kind of thought of the other day, when they say, somewhere between 10 or 20%, that leads me to believe that it's not a finite amount. They don't say 15% of every issuer, we're going to keep 15% of DSPP. It says 10 to 20, and the 10 to 20 would mean to me that there is a variable that is pulling and pushing shares in and out of the DTC. And the heat lamp theory is based around that trigger being volume. If everyone's wanting to buy and sell GameStop, all around one day, wouldn't they hypothetically need more shares, for operational efficiency? And that's what it was. Is the analogy was, when if you're a hamburger restaurant and a busload of 60 people are going to come, do you just wait, and keep all your hamburgers in the refrigerator? Or do you start to cook them all and put them under the heat lamp so then when they walk in, you can hand them all their 60 burgers? And so, that was the theory around what is, they're triggering volume to force maybe an algorithm to move shares into the DTC on
Got it.
the very day that GameStop is counting them.
Yeah.
And I do want to comment, when Paul Kahn makes these videos or AMAs, he's never talking about one individual company. So when he's talking about, typically we would hold somewhere between 10 to 20% of the shares, he's talking about typically they are transfer agents for hundreds of companies. I would not consider GameStop a typical company. I would not consider what's happening with GameStop a typical situation. So yeah, the typically 10 to 20%, that just, I don't think applies, and it just validates heat lamp theory in my mind.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And with that, it's like we see these huge spikes in volume. Where are those shares coming from? We've been tracking, as a community, all of the shares, insider shares, number of shares in ETFs and mutual funds. And in green here are all the DRS shares. This blue, dark blue, is institutional other, like banks, hedge funds. We know they're not holding on to them. But all the other components are either slightly growing or are growing quite a bit. In other words, there's been about 20 or 30 million shares in ETFs or mutual funds, and they've always been there, and they're slightly increasing. And there's theories about ETF shares being used for shorts and locates. So there's that. But from a fundamental standpoint, it's like, yeah, but where are they really getting all those shares from? And the idea is they're getting them from the plan shares with the in computer share. So a lot of us think. And what was really, there's a lot of coincidences in this timeline. When we got back from Grapevine, we started posting different bits and pieces. And a month after we started posting, especially the finding of 33% of all accounts being enrolled in that direct stock plan, SEC comes out with these notifications that, hey, if you're in plan, if you have a plan, set up, you need to talk to your transfer agent and direct them to DRS those shares if that's what you're looking to do. That was huge. SEC saying plan shares are not DRS, because for a long time people were saying, oh, plan, book, whatever, it's all DRS. No, in fact, it's not, and the SEC clarified that. And the FINRA came out the same day and said, you'll need to instruct your transfer agent to move those securities to DRS if you're making purchases through that plan, if you want your shares to be DRS. I think some of us feel like, with what's happening with DRS and GameStop, that the SEC maybe thought that there was so much disinformation, misinformation out there that they thought maybe they could be held liable somehow, and they needed to come
Mhm.
out and clarify this.
They
Why
were
else would
afraid.
they?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
Why else would they release this? They're afraid of something.
And
Mhm.
sure.
just a heads up, I don't think that page had been updated for 22 years.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, that SEC bulletin holding your securities. So you're talking about, I think someone had checked it on the Wayback Machine or whatever, but it hadn't changed for 22 years. Now all of a sudden it's July 12th. I would say a college student, a high school student, even probably a middle school student could understand the clarity of this language. A lot of the other things, they dance around book entry and all this other stuff. It is just so clear. It was almost like you got to make it so everybody can understand that if you hold plan shares that you bought through the transfer agent, they're not DRS, because if something, happens, and if people had plan shares, shares in the plan that were being moved in and out, of DTC, at least in my mind, well done, SEC and FINRA. Maybe they kind of wash their hands of some of it. Hey, we told y'all, if you left your shares in plan and something happened to them, we told you they were not DRS. And so I think that
Hmm.
that's what Lawson was getting into is, well, why did they come out and say this? They don't come out and say anything like this, and it's certainly not this clear. And why now? And that's kind of how we're feeling is that if ComputerShare wants to dance around the language and confuse people, and if certain subreddits, want to try to get people enrolled in the plan and not allow this information to get out, at least, the SEC and printers like we did our part,
Mhm.
the rest is on you. So.
All right. And what happens next?
So the direct stock plan,
Hmm.
who is enrolled? When we looked at the list in Grapevine, we could figure out the minimum number of accounts enrolled in direct stock plan. But some of the things we couldn't see was whether what we thought these pure DRS counts, and that's not really a good term to use. Really, we should use enrolled in the direct stock plan or not enrolled, right? Because your DRS, everything's DRS if you're not enrolled in the direct stock plan. But the columns we were looking at, there was a lot of information there, but we couldn't tell if some folks were maybe enrolled or had drip enabled. If they had drip enabled, then they were in the direct stock plan. Or if an account had a sell limit set, your account automatically gets put into the direct stock plan. So what we saw was a minimum of 33% of accounts were enrolled in the direct stock plan. It's probably likely much more. And one little tidbit, we went back to the statistics. We found 1.2 million shares directly registered through Mainstar Trust account, and we said, hey, if you have the drip enabled, and we knew a couple people that were in it, you were in the direct stock plan, and people started terminating, disabling drip or unenrolling from the direct stock plan. And it wasn't until 2 months later, Mainstar says we're no longer offering DRS, and they pulled back all those shares from DRS. So I think that was really telling, or really odd, that once people started unenrolling from the direct stock plan, that Mainstar then chose not to offer the DRS.
And that was 1.2 million shares, and kind of interesting is the registered share disclosures between when that happened went down 1.2 million. It was exact. I don't remember the numbers. It was 76.6. Went down 1.2 million. Whatever it was, we knew exactly how many shares were in Mainstar, and then we knew Mainstar undrs'd them all. And so it was 1.2 million shares, and the number went down 1.2 million.
But that's strange, right? Because if the overall DRS number only goes down by exactly 1.2 million, that implies that no one else bought and DRS'd. Like there were almost
Yeah,
zero
it would
purchases
be
of
that
DRS.
exactly the amount that bought had the exact amount that sold, or that the number was stagnant for some reason,
Ex
yeah.
which is
I like
extremely, I would say, unlikely, right? I mean, the chance for that happening, that feels more like a gerrymandered or a fixed
Yeah,
figure.
yeah, a little bit. It sure
yeah,
does.
Hmm.
like proxy voting.
Yeah.
Um, I I'm of the opinion until I see the list again that the minimal buying is offset by the minimal selling, and that's why it's staying stagnant. But I'm open. I do think it's really odd that it stayed exactly the same from previous quarter to the last quarter, but we'll see.
Hmm.
But
We've
it,
kind of, the handful of this that talk about this every day and are always trying to look for new information. We try to be, although we have very strong opinions, we try to really, our research base. We always say ask more questions until there's no more questions to be asked. And so when Lawson says, I think the numbers are right. It's because we don't want to say they're wrong until we know they're wrong. I do know how I think that they could be wrong, and we'll get into that. But we both saw the list and we saw, the numbers before and after. Did the language change open something up that wasn't opened up before? Maybe, but I know everybody's wanting to hear the numbers are wrong and here's why. And we're just not, we're not of the opinion that we're going to make a bold statement, like that without it. We're going to know, hopefully this summer, we'll have another data point. But
Yeah, we don't know for sure yet. We don't know what's
yeah,
going
we
on.
don't know for sure,
There's
right?
weird shenanigans happening, but we don't have any definitive like answer to that question.
Exactly.
just some language from computer share about their direct stock. If you look at the terms and conditions of their brochure, it says it accepts DRS shares and credits them to the participant's account. So this is a suggestion, if you have any planned shares, your DRS shares are going to be pulled into that direct stock plan. All right. They become DSPP shares. This is an FAQ that also suggests this, that DRS are not part of the company's investment plan, whereas all the other, if you have planned shares, that those are all going to be part of the DSPP.
That
And
can we go back one
yeah,
back to that screen. This was, I think this had been floating around a little bit, but it just really, part of when SEC and FINRA came out and said, shares purchased are not DRS. There was pushback on that. Some people were like, well, we don't know if that's true for every transfer agent or whatever. And so this what you're looking at right here, this was actually very important because it's very black and white. There's investment plan shares and there's not investment plan shares, and the DRS are not investment plan shares. It clearly states right there. One's DRS and the other one is DSPP, and so just having that validation, from computer share in black and white, was very strong.
Hmm.
and here's just, we verified through chat similar things. I believe this is 6 days going back and forth with one of the chat
Yeah,
reps.
I know this lingo so well. I know exactly what to ask, and I know, again, this is a chat rep, and so chat reps, aren't proof, but I would call evidence, and so there are chat reps that make mistakes, but I believe at least, I believe maybe they know me, and when I log in, maybe they give me somebody better. In the middle of this conversation, it actually got paused and someone came back and I felt like they were answering different. And I said, is this the same person? I had to kind of re-verify some things because they kind of dance around book entry a lot, and for clarity, book entry, with a hyphen in the middle just means
Hmm.
electronic. All book entry
Hmm.
means is not a piece of paper. And so, when you start asking these questions, it can really, it's very easy to get words jumbled up and then you're thinking one thing when, it's not the other. And so, I knew exactly which questions I want to ask, and it's what we've already gone over. And it's they always like to try to bring you back to that FAQ page, and the FAQ page has some weird language. And so it's like, I've read that FAQ page probably 100 times. I'm very familiar with it. If someone tries to send me there, I'm not going there because I already know what's on there and I know how it's poorly written and in which areas it's poorly written. So I said, I'm familiar with the content on there. I know that DSPP shares are not the DRS shares because they're enrolled in the count. It said direct stock accounts are either all DSPP or they're all out of the plan or they're DRS. Can you confirm? And probably just to get that question answered, it probably took me 30 minutes. Finally they're like, okay, finally, it's like, we could do this quickly or slowly, and I'm very polite, with these people. They're people like the rest of us. So I'm just trying to get the information so I can share it. So, confirmed that accounts are all in or all out of the plan, and that the accounts that are out are DRS and the accounts that are in are DSPP. And so this second question, if you look at the time, you can see, if you look on the left below correct, you can see there's like a line. This is actually, I cropped the first half of the conversation with the second half, but if you look at the time on here, 16:32, and then the second question is 17:23. It took me 50 minutes to get this second question answered, with dancing language and all this other stuff. And finally, because it was being jumbled up with book entry, I had to, when you talk about book and plan, you gotta say, just for clarity, when we say book and plan, both are book entry. Don't throw book entry back in there. So if you say book and plan, they'll say, oh, they're both book entry. And so, I was like, I had to reword this like 10 times, which is book and plan shares, both of which is a computer share made up, term, in accounts that are enrolled in direct stock plan, all of which are book entry, like we just went over, are not DRS, correct? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Which is just like, because people are saying, oh, if it's book and you're in the plan, then you're fine. And with my Nordstrom experiment and all that experiment is that, no, they're not, they're not. What some people are saying is if you have book and plan, that your plan is enrolled in the plan and your book is not. And that's not the reality. Again, the what the shares are is determined by enrollment or not enrollment, and it's your whole account.
It's all or nothing. If you have one share and plan, it enrolls your whole account.
Enrolls the whole
and then everything goes into plan. Yeah.
Right.
Makes
So
sense.
this was very strong because it's just a very simple graphic. People can kind of read it. It's like, got to get the wording right, because if you don't if you don't make sure to say both are book entry, someone trying to derail, what we're trying to get out here will say, oh, maybe they were talking about book entry. Like,
yeah, they're going to use red herrings to try to distract you.
There you go. Exactly. Yeah. Red herrings.
Okay.
So just to reiterate, over 33% of accounts when we looked at the shareholder list were enrolled in the direct stock plan, and at a minimum, so that represented at the time about 22 million shares. So if they are accessing these somehow on certain DRS record dates, they certainly have a lot of shares to grab from. We'll see what it looks like. Hopefully, again this June, we see the list. I'm hoping there's less direct stock accounts, but who knows?
22 million shares held at DTCC.
It's been very
minimum.
Difficult, it's been very difficult, for us to get this information out. Both Lawson and I were banned from the biggest subreddit, GameStop subreddit. We're both on Twitter, and we do post on Reddit still, but there's kind of the popular place, and then there's less popular places. And so I do want to give a big shout out, to the Reddit /GME. They have always been very polite to me and have allowed me to post my different, theories and discussions and haven't deleted anything and have so usually because some people are just all Reddit or and they don't go to Twitter, and they don't
Mm-hmm.
hang out another place. And so I do think it's important. We did have a subreddit that was banned, that we were on, that was growing very quickly because everybody knew that was where you get the good content, and it was banned. And maybe to go back, man, when you would think when we see the stockholder list, everybody would be happy, right? It's we're finally getting the information that everybody's been wondering. And I would, there are certain gatekeepers, that really did not want. They like everyone to dance around wondering, I wonder this, I wonder that, and we like to provide real information, and we're always looking for real information. And so if there's doubt in people's mind about what's going on, that actually kind of creates inactivity, or where people just kind of sit there and do nothing, watch the ticker all day, don't write shareholder proposal letters, or go see the stockholder list, or go out and make some money and DRS more shares. But we were very heavily attacked by a handful of people, for getting information out. And we still are, we still are. We don't have as big of an audience. And that's part of, why we're here. This is amazing content, and we want to share it. We don't want people only getting the suppressed content. Hey, buy, through direct stock plan and don't ask questions.
Yeah, and just route everything back to the DTCC.
Yeah, exactly. And most
I
people, man, the GameStop investors are smart as hell. Most of the people are just, they know when they're, the wool is being pulled over their eyes or whatever, and they do fight back. But if they fight back enough, they get banned, and all we're left with is a bunch of people. Yeah, just bought on direct stock plan. Yay. And showing screenshots. That's who's allowed to dance around, right now, because they're enrolling their accounts and other people's accounts that they convince in direct stock plan, which means those shares can be at DTC.
Okay. And I have a question. You said on the prior slide there's a minimum of 21 million. We see here the 21 million shares. Oh, minimum of 33%, right? And minimum of 22 million shares. Why do you say minimum?
Because when we're looking at the list, we could tell right away which accounts were definitely enrolled in the direct stock plan. But what we couldn't see were if account appeared to not be in the direct stock plan, if they had drip enabled, then they would be in the plan. We couldn't see whether they had that enabled or not.
Ah. So
Yeah,
you
we
didn't
can't
know
Or
tell
if they
where
if
had
the
these.
shares are
what
held. Someone's
Yeah.
book and then they have drip on, they would be in the plan, like Lawson was just saying. And if you put a sell limit on, oddly enough, if you mess around and put a sell limit on your account and then you say, never mind, it doesn't unenroll your account. So if you accidentally enroll by setting a sell limit and then you realize that's not for you, you actually have to go in and terminate your plan. It's the default is to keep you in this plan.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense. Another way for them to hide their shenanigans.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we put out this flyer. It didn't get a whole lot of attention, but I don't know if you have any suggestions on how we can make this more attractive to people. It does give a QR code to a website that shows you how to terminate the direct stock. If that's what someone wants to do, if they want to become DRS'd and get out of that direct stock. Or you could just Google terminate direct stock, and one of the first things that'll come up is a step-by-step instruction from DRS GME, where it literally takes you like 1 or 2 minutes to get out of the direct stock plan. It's got pictures step by step. I do want to say one thing, like there's been a lot of documentaries and movies about this whole saga, and not one of them gets into the big message, which is this DRS, what's been going on with DRS. There was this one, Ape Strong Together, they spent 50 seconds like 3/4 of the way through the movie and just mentioned it and then never talked about it again. It's really weird to me that the DRS thing is not the major focus on this whole thing, because this has never been done before. We've never been able to say as individual investors, yeah, we're holding and we have this many shares, because all that information is hidden in the brokers, right? Like you don't know how many people are holding on to GME and TD Ameritrade, well, Charles Schwab now, or how many individuals are in Fidel. That stuff is all hidden from us. There's estimates on Bloomberg, but I don't find when it comes to individuals that's it's not accurate. This we can say there are 25% of the outstanding shares held by individuals, and they've been holding on for over a year now. Right? We can say that we can say that definitively. That's crazy. That's never been done before. I think this stuff that we're talking about is going to be in future finance textbooks. The whole DRS movement, and I'm excited about it. This is why, like, I've just spent a lot of time researching with 6 days and stuff. This is pretty neat stuff. It's an exciting time. I'm a little distraught about my first 15 years of teaching finance, all these valuation models and stuff, realizing that a lot of that is meaningless, because if you have infinite supply with these naked shorts, it makes most of those models useless, right? You talk about the free cash flow model or the discounted cash flow model. You throw all these numbers in there, project the growth of the free cash flow, and you come out with this stock is overvalued or undervalued. Well, if the market realizes it's undervalued, then there's this demand, and then the stock price goes up. But if there's all these exceptions for market makers to do these naked shorts, they could create excess supply to depress the price. That's not factored into any of the undergrad or grad models for valuation. Like, that's really frustrating. Part of my drive here,
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're all in agreement on that, and I think the what I call regular people, that are just kind of oblivious to a lot of this. They trust price movement. If you bought a stock and the price is down, that means, but you thought it was a good buy, that means you were wrong in their mind. And so I think that's these movies come out and they talk about, I saw the Dumb Money movie, and I actually enjoyed it. Again, it didn't talk about DRS, which again is my passion, and that's unfortunate. But I think that people, they watch and then they're like, oh, cool, this happened. Let me check my Robinhood account and zoom out, and then they're like, oh, I guess it's over. Because they look at the price and they assume that means everybody's selling. And so that's why, that's part of why I'm such a big DRS advocate, is because the real retail numbers, how many retailers own shares, is hidden. You don't know how many retailers own GameStop stock that are in brokerages. And so we never have that number. And then, when people are looking at price goes up, they say, oh, everyone probably was buying. Price goes down, oh, it means everybody was selling. And this is, they're in my opinion, I would love to see more and more and more companies disclose direct registered numbers, because I believe that the modern investor, younger investor, whatever you want to call it, they want the disclosure. And that's disclosure right there. I want to know how many people love a company so much that they're going to continue to hold. They're going to put shares in their name. They're going to communicate with the companies. And so I really, I think Lawson touched on it before. There's only 2 companies that are quarterly giving these numbers. And so, GameStop is obviously one, AMC is the other. AMC has, I think it's maybe 1%, registered, whereas, they keep share diluting, and which is causing, a lot of different issues. But GameStop is at 25%, AMC's at 1% or less, and no one else does this. And
Yeah.
I have put a lot of time into trying to get more companies to disclose it, because I think it's important, and I think people are gonna gravitate toward those companies that are have these passionate investors.
Yeah, it could truly change, right, the structure of the entire market if naked shorting was operationally impossible because basically all shares are DRS, right? Or next to impossible. And that would be an amazing change in the evolution of market structure of getting back to free and fair markets because I'm in the same camp as you, Lawson, where I had the assumption that things were well regulated and, enforced. And this whole rabbit hole has led me to believe that they're not. And you and I talked offline about this, but you saw the Brazilian puts pop up on the Bloomberg terminal for for a day or two, and then they get deleted, and then Bloomberg comes out and says that was a data glitch, right? And it's awfully strange to have like how many data glitches have occurred around GME, how many times we've seen the price spike up, you know, 20% in a few minutes and then come back down, and then they just say that was a data feed reporting glitch from Ortex. It's not our fault. Oh, the short interest changed. Yep, that's a data glitch, not our fault. They
Yeah,
keep on having these glitches, and for a financial system that it should be as, secure and sophisticated as ours, for them to blame this is indicative of more likely, nefarious behavior.
I agree. Completely agree. That's why I
Awesome.
think
Well,
DRS is so important. Yeah.
I'm in complete agreement. And thank you guys so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. This has been a great dive down the rabbit hole. I'm excited to find out more as the story evolves. If people want to follow you and find you guys, what's the best way for them to get in contact? What are some sites you recommend they visit?
You can, I'm on Twitter, LawsonDT, at LawsonDT.
Okay. Awesome.
And I've got same thing. My I'm on Twitter is probably the easiest way to find me. I use the same username, 6days1week, on Reddit, Twitter, and Discord. Also Lemmy. I know Chives will be happy that I plugged Lemmy here, but if you go to drsgme.org, that'll tell you how you can find the communities that we hang out in. And both of us are very friendly, and I know you are as well. As long as people are open to discussion and not pulling up the red herrings and doing all this, other crazy stuff. I mean, we're having a really good time, and just reach out. But thank you again so much. This has been a great discussion.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. We'll talk to you again later.
All right, sounds good.